Well, welcome back to our coverage here on 13 WMAZ Plus. What you just saw at the end of the 12 o'clock hour was coverage from our sister station up in Atlanta, 11 Alive. They are anticipating some far worse impacts from this weather impact alert, these potential winter weather conditions. But also we have a kink in our forecast that they don't necessarily have as we go into tomorrow afternoon. So we'll bring you the latest update. We do have a few new changes with your forecast. Not overall too many changes, but we do have maybe some new watches and warnings that we will break down as we go into the near future. That was a walk around the quad. Our Skycam's very uneventful so far. It is just an overcast and a gloomy and a chilly Saturday that is beginning to settle in. So your temperatures right now, we do have a few upper 40s, 46, 47, and 49 across Thomaston, Forsyth, Monticello, and down to Roberta. But you do see more so a story of the low 50s and, of course, some mid 50s at 54 at the warmest. So a little bit of a temperature spread, but you can see on this current temperature graphic, there is some blue, some light blue entering from the north and the northeast, courtesy of these winds that are coming from the same direction. So we are watching a colder air mass move in from the northeasterly direction, indicating that our wedge setup is beginning to start to try to take place. So here's a look at your current temperatures all across areas that are really being impacted by this very large winter storm. 0 degrees, Kansas City. We have plenty of single digits to the northwest of us. 4 in Wichita, 9 degrees in Oklahoma City, 9 degrees in Indianapolis. But then you start to transition into some teens and some 20s. And it's really kind of this light blue line that you can see draped across areas of southeastern Texas, up into Louisiana, southern Mississippi, and then eventually kind of dividing Alabama in half, and then areas of the northern portion of the state of Georgia. That's going to kind of be your dividing line about where we should see some freezing and some sub-freezing temperatures, because areas to the north of it are going to see that deep dark blue color, which are going to indicate temperatures in the 30s, maybe in the 40s, but kind of in the close neighborhood of what color will be associated with freezing temperature itself. And obviously very, very warm and down in Florida, 66 degrees in Jacksonville, 78 degrees down in Orlando. In fact, Florida is the only state down here in the deep south, the southeast, almost in the entire eastern half of the United States that is not going to be impacted by this winter storm. So your winds, they have gotten an uptick since we started out this morning. We're now seeing anywhere from about an 8 to a 9 mile per hour breeze at the lowest, all the way up to some sustained winds up to 15 miles per hour in Cochran, an occasional gust up to 16 miles an hour down in Cordele. But throughout today, you should expect some breezy conditions, maybe up to 20, possibly even maybe occasionally up to 25 miles per hour. Widespread yellow on this graphic, and go ahead and get used to those breezy conditions because they are going to continue to stay put as we go into the near future, really into the beginning of next week. It might be finally Wednesday next week before we finally see the winds subside a little bit in nature. So the main headline for today is going to be breezy, along with some gloomy skies, going to keep the overcast skies in the picture all throughout the afternoon. And a light shower or two will be possible, but overall we're not looking at any of that wintry precipitation to get going until the numbers drop down. So 50 degrees for a high temperature. You obviously just saw some areas that were already above that, and you saw some areas that were just below that in terms of your current temperature. So that wedge is going to set up a temperature gradient. If you live farther to the north throughout today, you are going to have some high temperatures in the mid to the upper 40s, maybe right there around the 50-degree mark. But farther down to the south, you are going to have some values that are going to be above this 50-degree mark, maybe even approaching the 60-degree mark later on today. But overall, it is going to be a good mix of what your forecast is over the course of the next couple of days. Not all of central Georgia is going to have the same forecast, so we're trying to emphasize which areas are going to see those winter weather impacts and which areas are going to see something possibly in the way of severe weather as we head into tomorrow afternoon. So we should be reaching that peak temperature sometime within the next couple of hours. As we go to around 4 and 5 o'clock, we'll begin the cool down. I think it may even begin a little bit before what the meteorogram is hinting at, because by the time we go into the nighttime hours, 8 p.m., that's going to be one of the numbers that you want to pay attention to. That's going to be the earliest time frame that we could look at some of this winter weather to move in. But obviously this graphic depicts the temperatures in Macon, not all of central Georgia. I did tell you that everyone is going to have pretty good difference and a pretty good range in terms of what your temperatures are. So 46 degrees at 8 p.m. very likely going to already be in the 30s farther up to the north, and that's why we have that highlighted as the earliest time frame that some potential winter weather could get going. But satellite and radar is really quiet, with the exception of, yes, some widespread cloud cover, maybe a few isolated sprinkle showers. Looks like we actually might see one kind of around the Gray Highway area between Macon and Gray going up into Jones County, but that is a very minuscule sprinkle shower, so it might drizzle for a few minutes. You might have the occasional drop of water on your windshield, but nothing of the frozen nature, and it's not going to be anything that really impacts your commute so far this morning. Now, or I guess rather I should say this afternoon. We've been going since the morning, so it's 1 o'clock as of now. Here's a look at northern Georgia, where we can see a couple of spotty light showers, maybe some that are of the frozen nature just to the north of Dahlonega, maybe up here around the Dalton area, getting back up into southern Tennessee. Chattanooga actually is seeing its fair share of some widespread wintry mix, some freezing rain and some sleet showers. And then we go back to the west of Chattanooga, more so into south central Tennessee, and that's where you start to see some grays and some whites. That's going to indicate your snow showers. So northern Georgia right there on the fine line of seeing some snow showers, maybe more of a wintry mix, but that's all we're seeing as of right now. We actually did see some more widespread frozen precipitation as of this morning already in northern Georgia, and they are going to receive another round as soon as more widespread moisture does arrive. That's back over into northern Mississippi, very widespread, almost the entire northern half of Mississippi enveloped within that pink color, and then that's going to push over into Alabama and eventually over into areas of northern Georgia, but also our temperatures are going to start to get colder courtesy of that wedge setup. So we have colder air present over to the west, and we're looking at a reinforcing push from the northeast that is going to set up a very fine dividing line about what type of weather we will see as we go into the nighttime hours. So here's a look at the satellite and radar picture. You probably just saw Chris Holcomb showing this on the 11 Alive stream. It is a widespread winter storm. This is having impacts in tens of states and over thousands of miles here in central Georgia, in the deep south. So take a look at some of the drawings that I did make, and they're not exactly where some of the precipitation does stand. In fact, I would probably drag this back a little bit over into western Virginia, getting into West Virginia, the state itself, and most of eastern Kentucky. But at one point, we did see snow showers stretching from somewhere in New Mexico in between Albuquerque and El Paso down in Texas, all the way over to the couple of flurries that you do see that are getting really close to the Norfolk and Virginia Beach areas over in coastal Virginia, spanning nearly 1,600 miles. This is just the beginning of this, as it will continue to move farther up to the north and the northeast over the next couple of days. But from north to south, or I guess south to north rather I should say, from kind of the southernmost point of where we do see something in the way of frozen precipitation down in central Louisiana, the northernmost component of that frozen precipitation stretches not only through northern Louisiana, Arkansas, up through Missouri, but all the way into portions of eastern Iowa and getting into north central Illinois. Just over 600 miles of some winter weather that is spanning from south to north across the eastern United States. So it's a very, very big system, and it has prompted winter weather alerts all over the country. So here's our latest update with our winter weather advisory, which is what we have in place here in central Georgia. This is going to mean that your winter weather watch that we've had over the past 24 hours or so, that is going to mean that we have more confidence in those same impacts we were forecasting with the watch. And that is also going to say that the upgrade from the watch to the advisory still pertains to basically the same criteria and the same impacts. We are just looking at the onset of those impacts to be a little bit sooner into the future rather, I should say. So if a watch is issued farther out ahead of time, and then that watch gets upgraded to an advisory. That's all this upgrade was. It was just simply saying that the impacts are going to be closer to you and starting as early as 1 p.m. So this winter weather advisory has started already here as of the 1 p.m. hour, and it's going to go all the way until 10 a.m. on Monday. Seem pretty familiar? That's about the exact same timing that we do have for our weather impact alert that is in place through the rest of today, through all day Sunday, and going into the first half of your Monday. But very thankfully, we are not in an ice storm warning, which you will see areas along I-20 just to the north here in central Georgia are enveloped within that deep purple color. And that exists not only for areas along I-20 going all the way over towards Augusta, but the metro Atlanta area, I-75 north, and especially the I-85 corridor going from Atlanta up towards the Greenville area. This is exactly where we are forecasting the most ice accumulation down in the southeast over the next couple of days. Accumulations highlighted for 1/4 of an inch all the way up to an inch. What doesn't seem like that much, especially when you're thinking about this in the aspect of maybe some rain showers. 1 inch of rain, it's not even enough to help improve some of the drought conditions that we do have on a day-to-day and a week-to-week basis, really a month-to-month basis, I would say, as of the last couple of months. But it only takes 1/4 of an inch of ice to have some really drastic impacts. We'll touch on that subject in just a little bit longer. But for here in central Georgia, we do have ice accumulations up to that 1/4 inch value possible. And we'll drag it back to the beginning of this graphic so I can highlight which counties are enveloped within this. Now, just because you are not included in this, maybe you're just one county south of some of the counties outlined, doesn't mean that you couldn't still possibly see some winter weather impacts. I would say that the row of counties just to the south of the counties highlighted still have the potential for maybe a little bit of a light glaze of ice that's not going to amount to much besides maybe a couple of areas of the roads that do have some slick conditions. That would be possible. So I would say that's still possible in Macon-Bibb County. That would be possible in northern Houston County, as far down south as Warner Robins, very likely. Possible in areas like Fort Valley and Byron, maybe in Peach County, over to Crawford, over to Upson, northern Twiggs, northern Wilkinson, and down into Johnson County. So you guys are not outlined in this winter weather advisory, but I wouldn't doubt that you see maybe a couple of small implications in the form of winter weather. But if you are included in the winter weather advisory, tomorrow morning, I want you to go ahead and make plans to stay off the roads, because all of these areas have the potential for not just a light coating of ice, about 1/4 of an inch of ice, and that can make for very problematic conditions, very slippery conditions on the roads. And we also could see our fair share of some widespread power outages, maybe even some downed trees, the higher your accumulation of ice does get. So areas included in the winter weather advisory: Washington, Hancock, Baldwin, Putnam, Jasper, Jones, Monroe, Lamar, Spalding, Pike, and Butts counties. And then once we transition into that darker color, that purple color, that is going to indicate an ice storm warning, which is right on the cusp of central Georgia, hence why we have this weather impact alert. But what you will notice is the majority of central Georgia is not in any form of a winter weather advisory. So if you live in Lawrence, you live down in Bleckley, Pulaski, Dodge, Telfair, Wheeler, Montgomery counties, you guys are not looking at a winter weather risk. I've gotten lots and lots of questions about that. So what about my county? What about my county? If you are not highlighted in a winter weather advisory, you are not going to see problematic impacts. Now, you may see a little bit of a light coating of ice at the very most, but it's not going to be very problematic. Go ahead and throw that out the window. If you live down in Montezuma, you live down in Unadilla, over to Butler, down to Abbeville, Cordele, you're not going to be dealing with anything in the way of a winter weather risk. However, there is another risk that we will touch on in just a moment that you are going to be dealing with as we go into Sunday afternoon. But until then, you are looking good to go. So there's those ice accumulations one more time, and I'll zoom it out big picture view, because we in fact even have a winter storm warning, which is kind of in this fuchsia pink color that is well far to the north of us in areas that are forecasting maybe a couple inches, maybe up to a foot, maybe even up to about 2 feet of snow. So this is a very widespread system with watches and warnings as far back west as eastern Arizona, eastern Utah, into Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, down into kind of the Gulf Coast and all the way up through the mid-Atlantic and into the New England portions of the country. Even the very tip top of Maine is included in some form of a winter weather alert, a very widespread system that is not only going to impact some areas here in central Georgia, not only northern Georgia, but millions of people across the United States. So now let's get into actually something that did just get updated. This is your day 2 storm outlook. This is what I was talking about, areas farther down to the south. You're going to have a different severe weather risk as opposed to the winter weather, and that is going to be in the form of thunderstorms. and even possibly a brief spin-up tornado, which actually the chance for that has gone up a little bit, especially down in this yellow area where you will now see a level 2 out of 5 risk. And then most of central Georgia does find themselves in this level 1 out of 5 risk. And in fact, that green shade is expanded farther up to the north and the northeast. And I think this does cover just almost everyone in central Georgia in some form of a risk, whether it's the winter weather or whether it's going to be kind of this more spring and summer-like severe weather threat. So gusty winds are of course going to be possible when you have a strong to even possibly severe thunderstorm or two. And I would probably maybe up that to a couple of strong to severe thunderstorms, especially down in this yellow area. But most of central Georgia, I think, might get a warning or two. But we're really going to try to keep an eye out for tomorrow afternoon. This is Sunday afternoon. Once again, we'll go over the specific timing this is starting in just a moment. But a brief spin-up tornado. That is normally highlighted with a lot of our level 1 risks. But once you start to get into a level 2 risk, that makes us a little bit more confident that something in the form of rotation could pop up. But it's obviously always something that we look at when we're covering anything in the way of severe thunderstorms. So we will continue to keep you updated if that is to pop up. So first things first, I want you to go ahead and memorize what county you're in. We talk a lot about counties as opposed to certain central Georgia towns and cities because there are so many towns and cities that are very localized that maybe don't pop up on our satellite and radar or a lot of our graphics all the time. So I want you to know what county that you do live in, especially farther up to the north for that winter weather risk. And then as we go into Sunday afternoon, farther down to the south and the southwest about that potential thunderstorm risk. So knowing your county is very, very important because that is where your watches and warnings do get issued for. It's not going to be certain cities. It's not going to be we're forecasting this exact warning for Forsyth, Georgia, because there are more areas than just Forsyth and Monroe County. There's Culloden, there's Juliet. You're getting up into the High Falls area. There are many areas that are going to pertain to the forecast within a county, and that's what the watches and warnings do cover for the county-wide possible impacts. So here is a look at most of our central Georgia counties, but we do have a lot of what we call border counties. And I had a comment on Facebook that was asking about Lamar County, Georgia. Lamar County is going to be one county to the west of Monroe. It's going to be right here encompassing Barnesville, Georgia. Lamar County, along with Upson County, Taylor County, even down to Crisp County, and up into Putnam and Jasper counties, and along with that, maybe even Montgomery County and Toombs County. All of you guys are going to be considered what we call border counties. And technically, you're not in the central Georgia viewing area, but we get tons and tons of comments from people who live in those specific counties saying, hey, we still tune in to Channel 13. So I want to make sure that you guys do feel included. Maybe if you're included in the Atlanta market, you're kind of on the outskirts of it, or you're in the Columbus market, down to Albany, over towards Savannah. We'll have you covered if anything is to pop up in those areas as well, because we'd like to know, or we obviously have covered maybe some weather events in the past with some of these counties, and we have built a trust with some of those viewers, so we want to make sure that you guys get informed as well. But if you won't see the labels on here, I was having some trouble trying to make these labels. In fact, Lamar County going to be right here, once again around the Barnesville area. Zebulon, Georgia, that's going to be over here, one county to the west of Lamar County. This is going to be Pike County. Spalding County is to the north of both of those. That encompasses Griffin, Georgia. And as you cross I-75, kind of the triangle-shaped county right here, just one to the west of Jasper, that is Butts County. That encompasses Jackson, Georgia. And down here in between Treutlen and Wheeler counties, this is Montgomery County, encompassing Mount Vernon, Georgia, excuse me. And then going over one county to the east of that is Toombs County. So that's going to be the Vidalia area. Everyone else, I think that we can find at least a label for your county right there, but that's going to be where your county is located. Make sure that you know it, because we will be talking a lot about a county by county basis in terms of a lot of our graphics, because Future View does pick apart a couple cities, but this doesn't encompass areas like Monticello, Gray, up into Sparta, over to Sandersville. So you will see us talking about counties more often than just your general specific city. So here's a look at what we have in store for the rest of today. We can show you our typical future view, which is normally going to be a zoomed out view. It doesn't have any temperature plots, but given we are trying to depict the type of precipitation that's falling into tomorrow morning, that is going to be very important. And also, you're definitely going to want to see the temperatures into tomorrow afternoon, because that's also going to be a big reason why we have a severe weather risk in the form of some thunderstorms. So throughout the rest of this afternoon, going to see temperatures peak in the upper 40s, maybe right there around 50 degrees, maybe even a little bit warmer farther to the south. But as we go into the nighttime hours, Cloud cover still a dominating force in your forecast. A couple of light sprinkles, but nothing that's going to be really substantial in the way of rain until this next cluster of some showers does begin to move in around 10 p.m. But notice what is going to happen. Number one, there's cooler temperatures up to the north of us, mid and upper 30s, as opposed to some low and mid 40s farther down to the south. So as this big cluster of moisture creeps from west to east across central Georgia, you are going to start to see the wedge being a lot more profound, and that's going to lead to the transition in color of this big cluster of moisture. Whatever we have is going to start out as rain as we get into the nighttime hours, but the closer to around 11 p.m. to midnight, we are looking at our northernmost counties to see that rain transition into something of the wintry mixed nature. So a freezing rain, maybe even some sleet showers, and you will see some correlating temperatures with that. Now you are going to see the pink shade pop up in some areas that maybe are 33 or 34 degrees. This is obviously what's going to contribute to more of the mix. Once you get a little bit below that 32 degree mark, it's going to be more of a liquid precipitation possibly that does definitely freeze once it hits the surface. So those areas that get below 32 or at 32, that's where we're looking at the implications in the form of freezing rain, which is going to have ice concerns here in central Georgia. So that's mainly to the north. It does look like this cluster of pink does get pretty far down to the south. Now, I'm not saying that areas that aren't included in that winter weather advisory aren't going to see something in the way of winter weather, but we're talking about the impacts as opposed to that winter weather. You may have a brief sleet or maybe even a brief freezing rain shower in areas like Dublin, maybe down to Warner Robins, Cochrane, but it's not going to accumulate. It's not going to have any concern for your forecast as you maybe get up and get out the door on Sunday morning. So once again, if you're not in that winter weather advisory, have a little bit of caution on Sunday morning, but overall we're not looking at those impacts to be very widespread. We're really just concerned about our northernmost counties, mainly north of Macon, as we go into Sunday morning for areas that are going to see some widespread ice, especially those rural and maybe even some dirt roads that you do have county by county. So anything in the way of wintry weather, that should be out of the picture by the time we roll into 9 a.m. when most of your numbers are forecasted to climb back above 32 degrees. Well, now let's go into Sunday afternoon, which most of the first half of Sunday does not look any different than what we have in the forecast for your Saturday. However, there are a couple of key differences, and the first one is obviously this big line of yellows, some oranges, even some reds. That is definitely a very definitive squall line of some thunderstorms getting ready to move in. But take a look at the environment it's going to be encountering. It is not the same any single location in central Georgia. 36 degrees up in Eatonton at the 2 p.m. hour. So the wedge is still holding strong in our northern and northeasternmost counties, even into the afternoon on Sunday. Well, if you go down I-75, well, I guess if you're going from Eatonton to Macon, you got to go back down Gray highways and back roads, then make your way down I-75. 65 degrees in Cordele. That is a 30-degree temperature difference, and it doesn't stop there. In fact, as we go maybe into that afternoon time frame and the squall line pushes in, it's still a cold environment that it's encountering up to the north and the northeast. I don't anticipate much in the way of severe weather in our northernmost counties, but we could still see some stray severe thunderstorm warnings, maybe try to encompass them. But as we go farther down to the south, it's a warmer air mass. It's a more humid air mass. That is more ingredients to work with as a line of rain does come through. So this is going to be very profound, and it's going to get pretty loud and pretty messy outside as we go into starting around the 1 to 2 p.m. hour. I would anticipate this line to push through. By 3 p.m., it's starting to enter areas like Macon, get close to Warner Robins, already passing through areas like Forsyth, Thomaston, and Roberta over in Crawford County. Then we go into Sunday afternoon, 4 p.m., still continuing to be very widespread, encountering a lot of those warmer temperatures that you do see. 39 up in Eatonton, 70 degrees down in Cordele. So the wedge is not going to make its presence known for a long time in areas down to the south and the southwest here in central Georgia. 5 p.m., this line continues to push through down to the south and the southeast, getting close to areas like Dublin along the I-16 East corridor. And then that main leading edge, which is going to have probably the most severe impacts in terms of what we do see with thunderstorms that do roll in via the squall line. It's really just that leading edge. And of course, it is correlating to that perfect time of the afternoon when temperatures are going to be at their warmest, sometime around 2 to 3, 4, maybe getting into 5 and 6 o'clock. After that, that leading edge is really going to lose its steam as it moves out of central Georgia. But after that leading edge passes through, I do still want to tell you that there will be some backside rain, but this is not going to be anything in the way of severe weather. You might have some pockets of some steady to some heavy showers, maybe even hear a rumble of thunder on the backside, but it's not going to be near as messy as that leading edge will be. So we'll continue to hold on to the rain for most of our counties farther up to the north and the northwest, maybe into around 6 to 7 p.m. And then that rain is starting to move out of our south and southeastern counties by about 8 p.m. I anticipate by around 10 to 11 p.m. all the rain will finally be out of here, and then we are going to bring in the much colder air mass. This is a look at what happens as we go overnight into early on Monday morning. Eventually the cloud cover begins to clear, and that's going to be the first window where we could see some sub-freezing temperatures as we go into early Monday morning. This will be important too because that line of rain is going to pass through as we go into Sunday afternoon. There are going to be some pretty heavy rainfall rates associated with some of these thunderstorms, and that's going to lead to a lot of areas on the ground that are just going to have sitting water. Well, if you have sitting water, you obviously are going to have the numbers to dip down back below that magic 32-degree number. We could see some of those areas of sitting water refreeze over as we go into Monday morning, especially given the fact that we hold on to cloud cover. We don't get any peaks of sunshine throughout Sunday afternoon to lead to the evaporation of that water at the surface. So we have a good window of about, I would say, 5 to maybe 7 hours at the most where we will be below freezing temperature once we get into Monday morning. And then 10 a.m. is kind of the time that I do anticipate a lot of these numbers to crawl back above that 32-degree mark. And it's not going to be a warm afternoon by any means on Monday afternoon. We're looking at highs maybe in the mid to the upper 30s, low 40s, some mid 40s farther to the south and the southeast. But we will have sunshine, and these numbers will be above freezing temperature. I think the only areas that could worry about even more refreezing would be farther up to the north and the northwest, because that's the direction this colder air mass is coming through after this precipitation maker. And once we get into early on Monday morning, so we'll hold on to some colder temperatures, areas like Forsyth, Thomaston, maybe up into Jasper County, Putnam County with Eatonton, but farther down to the south and the southeast, I anticipate whatever is still standing at the surface in the way of water is going to continue to evaporate, and we will be nice and dry as we go into Tuesday morning. But if you still, by some reason or some realm of imagination, have some form of water down at the surface, your morning low temperatures on Tuesday are actually forecasted down in the upper teens, and that's not even the worst part about what the feels like numbers are going to be, because we will have breezy conditions on Tuesday morning. We'll touch on that in a little more in a moment. And this is showing you the same thing I just explained with the temperatures throughout today. This is just associating some colors with it. So that deep dark blue color builds in overnight into early tomorrow morning. That's going to be the window where we do have wintry precipitation chances up to the north. I know it says 33 in Macon and Dublin, but those are just two locations. If you're north of Macon, where once again the main risk of potential winter weather is going to be, your numbers are going to be a little bit lower than that, and obviously warmer down to the south and the southwest. And then here comes that warmer and more humid air mass, 72 in Valdosta, 33 in Athens. Now, I know both of those areas are not in central Georgia, but that's just giving you an idea about the impact the wedge can have on a forecast, especially if you start to see a warmer air mass combat that wedge farther down to the south and the southwest. So this is a spread of nearly 40 degrees from northern Georgia all the way down to southern Georgia. So our southern and southwesternmost counties where this air mass is coming from and trying to push the wedge out of the picture, that's going to be the most conducive environment in the form of some instability in the way of warmer and more humid air. And as we go into Sunday night, after this line of rain has finally moved through, 55 and 58 in Macon and Dublin, and those numbers are going to drop down very quickly. Down into Monday morning, around 5 a.m., we could see those numbers return back to freezing temperature. Then as we get into around Monday at 10 a.m., they'll get back above freezing temperature for a brief moment in the afternoon, and then we'll dip them back below freezing by a good margin going Monday night into Tuesday morning. So here's a look at the earliest onset of impact. So this is for your winter weather. We'll talk about your winter weather potential first and foremost. 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. That is already up in North Georgia. We have seen that already as of this morning, where they've had a good amount of a wintry mix, something in the way of some snow showers. Most areas in the impact zone are going to be impacted between the noon hour and the 8 p.m. hour. Now that is a long range, but what you need to know is this is mainly the Atlanta viewing area, northern Georgia, Atlanta, Gainesville, Athens, maybe some of northern central Georgia, but I do anticipate the earliest onset of our impacts to be after 8 p.m. And specifically, I think I'm eyeing that 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. window is when we're going to finally start to see some of that rain transition into something of the more frozen nature. And that goes for areas down here as far south as Macon. Once again, we're not really confident in many winter weather impacts farther down to the south. And that's where you will see that reciprocated on your severity of impacts graphic. So this purple color is exactly what you don't want to see. So Gainesville, Clayton, Georgia, getting close to Elberton, around the Athens area, just to the north of Athens, extreme. That's the severity of impacts that we are forecasting up there. So the language of the Atlanta stream and many people up in Atlanta, North Georgia meteorologists, they are going to use a lot heavier of a language than we are. We are not forecasting really severe impacts in terms of ice accumulation, but what we are forecasting for the most part is going to be maybe some low and possibly even some moderate areas, mainly northern central Georgia, mainly Macon farther to the north, but I wouldn't be surprised if this low category extended a little bit farther down to the south. So what we're looking at in that low category, very minor amounts of ice accumulation. This is looking like mainly just some nuisance ice. Like I said, a couple slick spots on a few roads. The moderate category is where you start to get into more concern, up to 1/4 of an inch of ice and some wind gusts up to 20 to 30 miles per hour. Gusty winds paired up with the accumulation of ice. That's going to allow for things like power lines, tree branches to freeze over. If you have about 1/4 of an inch of ice around tree branches and those power lines, that creates more surface area for very gusty winds to hit. And the gustier those winds are, they're obviously a lot more weight when you do have a coating of ice on things like trees and power lines. The gusty winds are going to allow for a lot of those to be downed and damaged in nature. And then we get into the high category, about 1/4 of an inch up to 1/2 inch of ice. And that does clip northern central Georgia. However, it remains to be seen how much that we do see, maybe above 1/4 of an inch of ice, but that's really for just Jasper, Putnam, and Hancock counties. And then the extreme category, of course, 1/2 inch to 1 inch of ice in some localized spots, and wind gusts up to 30 miles per hour. So the gustiest winds and the most ice accumulation is going to be found in northeastern Georgia, and that's where they are going to have the risk of maybe some long-lasting power outages and such, but that's not looking like the case down here in central Georgia. So ice accumulation impacts, that light glaze is going to be about 1/10 of an inch, just means some ice on trees and power lines, and like I said, some slick spots on the roads and maybe some of the sidewalks. So just have a little bit of caution, but continue to go about your day-to-day routine, and we will be bringing you some live reports of whatever ice accumulations we are seeing as we get into tomorrow morning. Like I mentioned, 1/4 of an ice, that is all it takes to become problematic. That's where it's going to start to coat your windshields, going to start to coat certain areas of your car, and this is where it's going to become pretty dangerous on bridges and overpasses and make it pretty tough to stop in terms of driving down on the roads. Trees and power lines can begin to start to fail, but you're not looking at long-lasting power outages like you would with, say, about 1/2 inch of ice. This is where the ice impacts can get crippling. Power outages could last for days, roads completely impassable, no travel whatsoever. And that's what they're saying up in north and northeast Georgia. I would still say if you live north of Macon, you would definitely want to stay off the roads for your Sunday morning, but they also can have the implications of widespread tree and power line damage. But now circling back to the second severe weather risk that we do have. This is your day 2 outlook, level 1 for most of central Georgia, including Macon once again. There are some areas that are overlapped in this severe weather risk and the winter weather risk for both on Sunday. It is just a whirlwind forecast. I mean, just as if the forecast hasn't been complicated over the past 3 or 4 days, we've continued to show you the latest trends with models. They have not been agreeing whatsoever. And when we finally start to fine-tune your winter weather forecast about those potential impacts, then the SPC throws this at us. So it is just really a tale of two forecasts, but some areas they could have both in this. So we're talking about Macon, we're talking about Forsyth, we're talking about Irwinton, but really down here farther to the south and the southwest, that's what I want to turn your attention to, because that's new as of this 1 p.m. stream, a level 2 out of 5 risk for areas like Sumter County, getting down to Sly County, getting down into Chris County. Now, we know weather doesn't obey these specific categories. If you live farther down to the south and the southwest, you are going to have more potential for not even a strong to severe thunderstorm warning, but maybe even possibly a brief or a spin-up tornado. In terms of the tornado potential, we'll show you this graphic. This is one of our high-resolution models that picks apart the instability. So this is going to kind of show you how how many features in the atmosphere are going to be there that's suitable for maybe something in the way of tornadic development. And once again, that southeast or southwestern quadrant, of central Georgia, but mainly our southernmost counties, even getting into our southeasternmost counties. If you live up to the north and the northeast, the wedge is still pretty profound. That cooler air is really dominating your forecast. It's these areas that start to warm up and start to get more humid throughout the day on Sunday afternoon, and then that risk does move out as we go into Sunday night. So over the next 3 days, high temperatures, don't really pay attention to those because each and every place in central Georgia is going to have a different high temperature, different low temperature because of that battling ground between the wedge ushering in that cold and dry air to the north and the northeast, and then down to the south and the southwest. It is going to be a little bit warmer, especially tomorrow afternoon. 60 degrees is not your high temperature for everyone. In fact, most areas around that 60-degree mark are going to be farther down to the south and the southwest. You may not get out of the 30s if you live up to the north and the northeast. So you won't see anything in the way of that winter weather icon. We elected to not put one on the 7-day forecast, which does also translate to this next 3 days graphic. Just really looking at maybe some light showers throughout the rest of your Saturday, but it's this overnight time period. So where this red box does start into early tomorrow morning, that we would have the possible winter weather. So that mix of rain and snow. And then after that, we're not going to look at anything in the way of wintry weather as we go into Sunday afternoon. Even if you do live in those areas that are cooler up to the north and the northeast, it's still not going to be cold enough to produce a wintry mix or anything in the way of snow showers. We are looking at pretty much straight thunderstorms throughout the afternoon on Sunday. So obviously there are two different risks that we have to nail down, and Atlanta may be looking at worse winter weather impacts, but we have a severe weather risk here. So we have both that we're trying to cover and make sure that we're trying to give focus to both of those severe weather risks. Then we go into Monday and we still have the first half of the day highlighted in your weather impact alert for some of those areas that still have some surface water that could refreeze back over, as we have a low temperature of 28 degrees on Monday morning. And another update that we just got as of this stream, just a little bit before the stream. I guess I've been going on for about 35 minutes now, but we do have a cold weather alert. So this is going to be a cold weather advisory for many areas in north and northwest central Georgia. So those areas I was talking about where that air mass is going to come through as we go into Monday morning. It's only a 4-hour period on Monday, but we're looking at wind chill values from 0 degrees all the way up to 15 degrees in the highlighted counties. So I do anticipate the farther west and northwest that you live, I'm looking at Thomaston and Upson County, Lamar County, over to Monroe County, Spalding, and getting down to Pike counties. You guys are going to have the potential for maybe even some wind chill values that get down into single digits. So it is going to be blistering cold as we go into Monday morning. We'll cross that bridge once we get there. We have a very eventful Sunday to get through before we even start talking about the cold weather next week. So most of today looks good. If you have anything that you need to do, whether that's go grab a couple extra groceries, go out, get a charging bank for maybe your phone, anything that you need to go out and do, errands wise, maybe want to go out to eat and you might be cooped up for a little bit in light of maybe some possible ice accumulations, go out this afternoon and do that. Once we get into the nighttime hours past sunset today, that's going to begin the window where that wintry weather is going to begin to move in. And once again, the risk for that wintry weather is going to be Macon northward. I expect some small impacts in areas like Macon, maybe down to areas like Jeffersonville, maybe even Warner Robins, but the main risk of ice accumulation that is going to create some hazardous conditions and some problematic conditions, that's going to be Macon farther up to the north. And then a quick warm up on Sunday afternoon, especially down to the south and the southwest, leading to heavy showers and some storms where we do even have a low-end tornado risk that we are going to be looking out for. That's mainly farther down to the south and the southwest, but we will continue to keep everyone updated if a severe warning does pop up in central Georgia. So your 7-day forecast, very, very eventful over the course of the next 48 hours. Then as we go into the beginning of next week, all you need to really worry about is just the general cold. In fact, if we keep the breeze around on Tuesday morning, we're very likely looking at another cold weather advisory with an even lower morning low temperature of 17 degrees. So this is not only going to be just some cold weather that settles in behind this winter storm, this is looking to be the coldest air so far during the winter season. And it's going to stay put as we go throughout the rest of the work week. I do anticipate maybe the passage of another frontal boundary because you can see a drop off in the numbers, 23 for a morning low on Thursday. back down to 19 degrees on your Friday morning. So go ahead and get used to the cold air that is going to continue to arrive. I think your only window of really enjoying some above average temperatures or maybe even near average temperatures will be Sunday afternoon, but that's also going to be paired up with a messy atmosphere. All in all, not a very pleasant 7-day forecast, a very eventful, what looks to be kind of last 10, maybe even week of January. Or 10 days or a week of January. So continue to stay updated. We're providing updates around the clock here on 13 WMAZ Plus. I just talked for 40 minutes straight, and I'll be back at 2 p.m. to once again bring you another update. Very unlikely that I will go as long as I just did, but like I said, we're updating around the clock. 2 p.m. will be my last stream. Then we're handing off to David Guerrero and Ben Jones throughout the rest of the afternoon, evening, and into the nighttime hours. Then Ansley Parker and I will be back with you early tomorrow morning, dark and early, providing you updates in real time about what the current conditions are in terms of that anticipated wintry mix. And then we'll keep you updated about what's in store in the way of possible severe thunderstorms as we go into tomorrow afternoon. So that was a whole lot. Hopefully that was a lot that you could understand. But right now I'm going to send it back to Carmen Brown, who has more on what we're expecting.
Hey, well, thanks so much, Alex. You know what? We just appreciate you being detailed and appreciate you continuing to track that for us. Now, you can continue watching the radar 24/7 as winter weather moves into central Georgia. What you can do is scan this QR code on your screen right now and stay up to the moment with the current conditions as winter weather moves into our area. You can stay with us on 13 WMAZ Plus all day today for continuous storm updates.